Hi, welcome back for another video. I'm Tanya, for those of you that are new here, and I am a watercolor artist and a furniture flipper, so you will be seeing both types of tutorials on this channel. But today I'm going to show you a watercolor tutorial on how to paint a bird using watercolors and the real brush pens. So I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so I have my Arteza watercolor paper. I've got my Grumbacher brushes. I have a size 3, 5, 7.5 inch wash brush. I've got my Winsor watercolors, and I also have my Arteza real brush pens. So I'm going to be using those more towards the end. So I'm going to be mixing a little bit of both types of paints. And then I'm actually going to be drawing out my bird in the Prismacolor watercolor pencils. Sometimes I find it's easier to use the watercolor pencil because then you don't have to sit there and erase all your pencil marks at the end if they're showing, because this is obviously watercolor and it's just going to blend in with your painting naturally. So, all right. I also have an image here of a bird. You can choose any bird you want. I use these little calendars. Obviously, this one's from 2015, so you can see how long I've had this. But they've got great images. I have the series in flowers, I have it in birds, and I think I have one more. I'm not sure. But anyways, so if you go to any bookstore, you can find these. They're just really, even though it's outdated, you could just use them for the images. So I'm going to be drawing that little bird. Oh, and he's called a yellow warbler. So that's who I'm drawing today. Okay, so I'm going to take my Prismacolor pencil and I'm just going to start to freehand him. If you feel that you need to trace the image, go for it. I am just going to go ahead and freehand him. So I want him about this big on my page here. So I'm hoping you can see this because it is a yellow watercolor pencil. So I'm going to do an oval for his little head, and then I'm going to come in for an oval with his little body. Maybe I'll make him a little smaller. And I want him kind of chubby. So I've got my two ovals there, and then I'm going to start connecting them. So this will be the little neck and the chest area. And then we'll go down to his little tail. And then we'll connect the head to his back. So that's all it is really two ovals for birds. They're really easy. Birds are not hard to draw. And then we'll just make his little tail, comes down. I'll have it bleeding off the page. And then he's got a little wing here. So this is just kind of a rough drawing because we're going to be painting this in anyways, and I could just start changing things as I'm painting them. But this is just a little sketch. Okay, and then we'll put his little beak. And then I actually want to put in where his little eye is going to go. So right around there. Okay. And then he's got his little leg coming down, and there's a branch. So again, you could trace this if you want to. I'm just freehanding it. And then his little claws. The branch comes up a little bit. Okay, so that's really all I'm going to do. So again, this was Prismacolor watercolor pencil, and it's just going to dissolve into my painting. So if you were to do this with the number 2, you can go in and erase your pencil marks later if they're showing through. Okay, so I am going to use, you don't have to follow along with me obviously, especially if you have a different bird, but I'm going to be using Winsor yellow and cad yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and get those wet on my palette here. Oh, and I have two different different cups of water. One's for cool colors and one's for warm colors. So you don't have to keep running to the sink every 2 minutes to change your water. All right, so I'm gonna get my bird saturated here where he's yellow. And actually I still have a little yellow on my paintbrush, which is fine because he's gonna be yellow anyways. I'm going to come in with my cad yellow and I'm going to start to darken my color here. So I'm using the 1/2 inch flat brush right now, the wash brush. And I'm just gonna lay down, I'm just kind of looking at my image, and I'm also looking at my painting. So I'm going back and forth and just kind of seeing where he's a little darker, where he's a little lighter. If obviously your bird has some white on him, you're gonna wanna leave some negative space, which means just don't lay down any paint at all. Just leave the white paper showing through. And you can also come in at the end if you see that you didn't leave white space where you needed to. I sometimes use, it's just white ink, acrylic ink, and you can come in at the very end for some details if your whites are not white enough. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. He's a little bit lighter, brighter yellow actually, on his back. So I'm gonna come in with the lemon yellow for his back, because he's a couple different shades of yellow. And his wings, I'm going to show you the picture again. His wings have this kind of brownish gray in them, but it's got the yellow still showing through. So I'm going to do an underlayment of the yellow, and then we'll layer on the brownish gray later. So I'm just going to come in with that lemon yellow again, because this bird doesn't have any white. So he has light yellow, but not white. So I'm just gonna go ahead and lay down a light yellow wash on his wing. Okay. And then you can just kind of shape him, you know, if he's not shaped correctly, you can, at this point, just kind of reshape his body if you want to. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and dry him right now, because then we're gonna put another layer on. Or if you don't have a heat tool or a blow dryer, you can just let it air dry. But I'm gonna go ahead and blow dry him. Okay, so my bird is pretty dry, still a little cool to the touch, which means he's still a little damp, so he's not completely dry, but that's okay. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start deepening some of my yellows around his eye with a little bit more of that lemon yellow, and then I'm gonna start bringing in some of the brown tones. So right now I just have a little bit of that lemon yellow, and I'm gonna start brightening up a little bit of that cad yellow that I had done before. And I'm going to start bringing in a little bit of burnt sienna. And actually, I think I'm going to mix burnt sienna with a little bit of Payne's Gray. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of that around his head. Just darken up that yellow a little bit. And as you can see, I'm going around his eye because I want his eye to be bright black. So I'm going to start coming in on his tail. He's got all these like little patterns here, all these little lines on his wings. So I'm going to try and achieve that look with my 1/2 inch brush. And as you can see, my hand is staying still, and I'm just using my my wrist. So then that way all my feathers are going in the same direction. And then these down here. There. So now I've got those feather marks. All right, and I'm going to start deepening some of those. And I want to leave a little of that yellow showing through. And then he's a little darker on his back. And you can kind of feather that going down his back a little bit. And then he's actually got some of that dark on his tail. He's cute. Darken up his face a little bit around his eye. Between his eye and his beak, he's a little bit darker. Good. All right, I'm gonna dry him one more time. Okay, so I'm gonna come in with my Arteza black brush marker, watercolor marker, and I'm gonna just start doing his eye. And it's a little bit more, birds have a little bit rounder eyes than we do. So I'm gonna come in with just the tip of it. And I'm gonna outline it. And then I'm gonna fill it in, but remember, there's probably highlights and stuff in there, so wherever there's highlights, leave it white. So I'm just gonna make a little round mark here because he's got a highlight there, and then he's got a couple little highlights down here too. And I'm just gonna start to fill it in. And these watercolor markers, they're either called watercolor markers or real brush pens. It doesn't really matter, it's the same thing. But they are wonderful. They've got the finest little tip. You can get so detailed. I love using these for just coming in like at the end of a painting for details and stuff. And you can use them for the whole painting as well. I've done that too, and that works out really well also. But what I find doing the most, that I do the most, is mixing. I like to mix my regular watercolors with the real brush pens. Okay, so I'm gonna come in with a number 3, and I'm just gonna blend it out a little bit. And I've left some highlights. Now, if your face was still wet, if his little face was still wet, your eye would be bleeding out and you would get a feathery look. And I'm not sure I want that on this picture, but I'm going to show you anyways. So I'm giving it a little bit of a, I'm pulling the black out, and actually his face is not wet anymore, so it's not doing what I had just said. But if his face was wet, you would start bleeding and it would look like feathers. It would look really, really soft. But I'm just pulling a little bit of that black out just to give it a little bit of a shadow around his eye. Okay. Kind of gives it a little bit more of a realistic look. And then he's got a little bit of darkness coming out. So I'm gonna pull that black out even more. And again, that's all from the watercolor brush. So see how you could just keep pulling the paint out? They're just so awesome because you can get a detailed look, you can get a blended look. And if you feel like you need more, just wet his eye a little bit more and you can bring it out even more. And now your little bird's got some darker feathers around his eye. Okay, I'm going to do his beak now. And I think I'm going to use, what do I have here? it's called coffee, but it's just a dark brown for his beak. I'm gonna turn my bird. Just with the tip. And then you can, I usually do the little outline of the beak. And then he's got a little line here where the bottom beak and the top part meet. And then he's got this little round thing there. I think that's their little nostril, how they breathe. And actually, I'm gonna start filling it in with a gray. So right now I did the brown and a gray. And I'm just going in slightly with it, because then I'm gonna take my watercolor, or my brush, and I'm gonna blend it in. So see how I didn't do the whole beak? It's because I want some lights and some darks in there. I don't want it to be just a solid color. And I'm gonna blend in his beak with his little face, soften up that line a little bit. And bring it out. And if you think you need more, then you can add more. Otherwise, I think I'm gonna add my, my mixture that I did over here with my Payne's Gray and my Burnt Sienna. I think I'm gonna add a little bit of that to it. I'm just gonna blend it. Oops, a little too much water on my brush, that's okay. And I'm gonna blend it out. Like that. And then you can let this dry and go over it again if you want to. And I think we're gonna start putting in some details. It's pretty dry now. We're gonna go in with some details here. So I'm gonna use the same brown. And I'm just gonna kind of come in and just kind of mimic the lines that I had done before. And I'm just deepening these lines a little bit. And I'm going kind of fast. The faster you go with your watercolor marker, the more grainy look you're gonna get, especially on the rough paper. And that's okay, because I'm gonna be blending this out. Okay. I didn't want it to be too harsh of a line, so that's why I went kind of fast. All right, I am going to take my number 7, and I'm gonna go over them. And I'm gonna just go right over the line, and I'm gonna let it bleed out. I don't know if you can see that, but it is starting to bleed right out. And I'm softening up the line. And then you can start manipulating your paint if you want it to go up a little bit more, if you want it to go down, if you want it to be thicker, thinner. So you can start manipulating your line right now. But I'm gonna leave that look of the yellow showing through because the bird has that. And bring a little bit of it out this way. And I'm gonna do these lines. Okay. And I'm gonna bring in a little bit and round out this wing a little bit. Just kind of closes it off a little bit. All I did was bring in that mixture that I had done before, but a little bit darker. And we'll round it out this way. Yeah. Cute. Okay, so you can keep going and playing with this with as many details as you want. for the sake of the length of the video, I'm not gonna be playing around with him too much, but I can sit here and deepen them. And actually, I'm gonna go in and show you, I'm gonna deepen in some of his, the yellow in his wings a little bit. I'm just pulling in that cad yellow, and I'm going right between those marks that I had just made with the brush pen. So I'm deepening that yellow a little bit. But you can play around with this all day. Especially with birds, their feathers, you can get so detailed if you want to. Darken up his tail a little bit. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let him dry a little bit, and I'm gonna go onto his leg. And I'm gonna use the Arteza again. And this one's called Sunset Yellow, if you have that. If you don't have the Arteza brand and you have a different brand, don't worry about it. It's just a golden yellow. And I'm gonna go around where his little legs are, his little claw. He's grabbing onto this little branch. And I'm gonna fill him in a little bit, not all the way, because I'm gonna let the water in the brush do the rest. And actually, I'm gonna come in with a little bit of that darker color up towards where his leg and his body meet, just because it's a little bit more shadowed. So I did the two different markers. This is the yellow and that's the brown, and I'm just coming in with a brush with water, and I'm gonna start blending it together. And I'm filling it in. So that's why my marker, I did not fill in my area completely. I left some of the negative space showing through because I knew I was gonna be blending this out. And if you don't wanna blend it out and you just wanna use it as more of just a pen, then you could just make it more solid if you want to. But I like the look of softening it a little bit. So I don't really do the whole area. And then you can always come in. I'll come in with a little bit of my my mixture again of the burnt sienna and the Payne's gray, and I'm just gonna darken him up a little bit, especially under his little body, and I'll darken up a little bit under his claw because there's probably a shadow there. Cute. Okay. And I'll bring his other little leg. You don't really see the other leg in the picture, you just see a little bit of the claw, but I'm gonna go ahead and do it. So I'm gonna bring in a little bit of that yellow, and then you just see a little claw coming around like that. And actually this leg's a little bit darker because it's like completely under his body. Just a little bit peeking through so you can see his other little leg. All right, now I'm gonna do a wash of, what color should I do? You know what, I'm gonna do just a lighter version of my mixture just to keep it simple. So it's still the Payne's gray and the burnt sienna, and I'm gonna come in and do the branch. You can come in with any colors you want. It could be just the Payne's gray, it could be more of a yellow, you could do like a green stem, like if he's on a little flower. But I'm just keeping it simple, and I'm just gonna use the same mixture. But it's just watered down, so it's not as vibrant. So I am going to darken up one of the edges, and I'm going to do that with my my gray again. Let's see what happens. Yeah. So he's a little bit darker under where his body is because there's a shadow, and there's like a little shadow where his claw is. Now where my paper has dried, obviously the marker is going on a little bit darker. Where my paper is saturated, it's not as dark because the pigment that's inside here is mixing in with the water, so it's going to be more of a translucent. it's gonna be lighter. But where my paper has dried, it's more of the pigment going down with no water. So it's a little bit more vibrant. I'm gonna blend that out. And actually I wanted it a little darker than that. So I'm gonna just take some Payne's Gray, water it down a little bit, and I'm gonna tap it in there, just so it looks more of like a shadow under him. And I will go ahead and shadow some of this little branch, almost like it's a broken little branch. And then you can start playing around with some broken lines if you want to give it, especially if it's a branch, it's going to have some texture to it. So you can start playing around with more of like a dry brush for the rest of the branch. All right, I am going to, he's dry. I think I'm going to make some of his yellows a little bit more vibrant. So I'm going to take my cad yellow again. And you can give him a little bit of texture on his back if you want to. So I'm using the brush, not like the fat way, the long way. I'm using it more like for just like a skinny line, and I'm coming in sideways. And I'm just giving him some texture so that lighter yellow is peeking through, but then the darker yellow is going on top. All right, now I'm gonna bring in a little bit of the branches. So I'm gonna just use my sap green, and I'm just gonna make, I'm sorry if I said branches, I meant leaves. I'm gonna bring in some leaves, some more roundish leaves. So I'm gonna get that little area saturated. And I'll make another little leaf coming out this way. So my paper was not wet first. I'm just putting paint directly onto my dry paper. I'll have this one bleeding off, and then maybe I'll make another one bleeding off right here. So I'm gonna keep playing around with the leaves, and I might make a few more branches coming around. Okay, so I went in and I added a few more leaves, and all that is the sap green with a little bit of cad yellow, and I just made like little ovals. That's it. So, okay, so now we're gonna go and we're gonna add a little bit more detail to this little bird. So what I wanna do is add a little bit of yellow to his beak. So I'm gonna pick up my Arteza, and I'm just gonna come in with a little bit of yellow. It's just a slight little yellow on his beak. And I'm gonna go in a little bit over his claws. Okay, so that just kind of deepened up his claws a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and give his wing a little bit more detail. So I'm gonna come in, actually, you know what I wanna do is I wanna add a little bit of that lemon yellow to the outside of him, just so it kind of brightens up his outline a little bit. So I'm gonna come in with just the lemon yellow, and I'm just going over the outside. And you can actually bring it out a little bit because he's a little fuzzy. So if you wanna make like little, like the fur's coming out, the feathers are coming out, you can make it a little bit more of that kind of look, so it's not as smooth. And so that's more of his like little belly area. His back is definitely smoother, but I'm gonna still come in with a little bit more of that lemon yellow and just brighten him up a little bit. Kind of gives him a little bit of a glow look. Good. All right, I'm gonna add a little bit of that yellow, the cad yellow this time. And just kind of blend it back out a little bit here. Just deepens it a little bit. Good. All right, that little white space on his nose, we're gonna just kind of give it a little bit of a, so it's not completely white. We're just I'm gonna put a little bit of my mixture over it again, which is just the burnt sienna and the Payne's Gray. Go over his beak a little bit. Okay. So the only thing that should be really bright white is his eye, the reflection in his eye. And actually, I'm gonna close that up just a little bit. It looks just a little too big for me. So I'm just going in with a very light wash of Payne's Gray, and I'm gonna close it up just a little bit. There. It's just a little bit too big. All right. And I'd like to put in a little bit of texture in his wings. Okay, so I'm gonna use the coffee brown again, and I'm just gonna come in with just the tip, very lightly, and just add some feathery little marks. And like I said before, you can play around all day with this. You just kind of have to know when to stop. Just to kind of punch it out a little bit. And then actually, I think I am gonna go over the ones on his tail just to soften them up a little bit, because right now that just looks a little too harsh for me. So I'm just going on over it with a little bit of water in my paintbrush and softening them up a little bit. And then you could even bring these up a little bit if you want to. And I'm gonna crispen up his eye a little bit more. And actually, I think I'm gonna add a little bit of the black to the underside of his beak a little bit. There. And I'll bring this out a little more. And I'm gonna blend that in just a little bit. So I love blending the watercolor real brush pens with just regular Winsor Newton watercolor. I love the look of blending them because they have two different looks. One's a little bit more detailed, one's a little bit softer. You can manipulate them together. Gives you a beautiful look. So I'm just gonna bring down, darken up under his little face a little bit, like he's got a little shadow under there. And you can go in and play around with like detail of the leaves and the branches. Actually, I think I might darken up this branch a little bit, but I'm not gonna put in too much detail in the leaves. I kind of like them soft because then the focus is more on the bird. If you have too much detail all over the place, your eye is all over the place, but right now, especially the way the leaves are positioned, they're all kind of focusing in on the bird. So your eye obviously goes to the bird first. So I'm gonna leave the leaves nice and soft. All right, so I'm gonna come in with my Payne's Gray and my burnt sienna again, and I'm just gonna darken up a little bit this branch. Perfect. He's so cute. there you go.
Thanks so much for watching the video. I hope you liked it and learned a little something. And if you did like it, please give me a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more videos like this one. And you can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Have a great day. Bye.